Yo, another episode of Real Sankara Hours. Real Sankara Hours. Follow us at Sankara Hours on Twitter. We got another free show for you. This is a free show for y'all. For those of you who are listening to this for free, we encourage you to subscribe. www.patreon.com/Real Sankara Hours to get bonus content for $5 a month and contribute to the show because during a time like this we need independent black media. So
I mean, your favorite white lefty podcasters can't talk about it. They really can't. No. Not in the way, we are not to act like we have have all the answers, but we have movement experience and historical context in a way that other people just don't. So
we're going to be talking about obviously the anti-police protests going on throughout the country, and which have also sent shockwaves throughout the world as well, because there's a lot of protests in other parts of the country that are protesting against systemic racism and police violence. So we're gonna be talking about just we're going to keep that discussion going. Basically, it's just some new developments. This is we're recording this on June 10th, 2020. So these protests have been going on for, I think, 2 weeks. So let's just dive right into it.
Should we introduce ourselves?
Oh, right, yeah. So I'm Adam Hudson. Follow me at AdamHudson5 on Twitter.
And I'm Peter M. Gunn. Follow me at MGunnPeter. Though, one thing I do want to say about social media right now is that as dumb as Twitter can get, it has reminded me why I was ever on it, in the first place, because it's a way to get information across that you can't do anywhere else. But you also really have to be careful because these companies are work with the feds, okay? They work with the police.
Yeah.
And, this isn't Twitter, but I discovered something. I was watching an organizer's story on Instagram, and something popped up, and it said, this post may contains partly false information. And then I literally had to, then they said, why does this say this? And it says that it's, the Associated Press flagged this as partly false or whatever. But what it was a picture of that Instagram had flagged as misleading information was a picture of the Columbus City budget that shows how they spend 10 times as much on the police as they do on anything else. It's something you had retweeted, Adam, I believe. And, somehow that got flagged as misleading information. So, it's important to understand that, despite the fact that Twitter, put Black Lives Matter in their home office or whatever, despite the fact that they really made a lot of bread off of it, you cannot trust these social media companies. And, they are doing as much suppressing the movement as they are amplifying it. And so, we do, one of the things of this, and one of the things of, taking this into a broader and more long-standing insurrectionary anti-police movement is developing our own platform. So, we'll maybe we'll have conversations with tech-savvy people about that, because it's something I've been thinking about a lot. But, what else has been going on? Oakland police, didn't they, fire 40 shots into someone's car?
I think so. Well, I know in San Jose there is a black man who was basically shot in the nuts by a rubber bullet in San Jose, and he was actually a anti-bias trainer for police officers. So they shot him in the nuts with rubber bullets at a protest, and he was the one who was supposed to train police on how to be less racist. So that right there shows that all the sort of let's get rid of implicit bias in police, that training, it just doesn't work. They don't care. And I think
if anything, it makes them more racist.
And also let's just start with this, because this has been on the news. So Joe Biden, I think this was a couple days ago, Joe Biden, basically who's the Democratic nominee at this point. He came out and said he does not support defunding the police, and not just him, but also Bernie Sanders. He was like he said he didn't support defunding the police. He gave some I'm gonna try to find the actual quote, but he gave some sort of very tepid response. But he basically
fucking idiot.
He basically poo-pooed the idea of defunding the police. I think he was more like, we need smarter police or something.
Yeah, no, we need he's like, we need to give cops more money. We need to pay them more. We need to reward them for all the murders they've committed. You can't make this shit up. Like, here's what let me say about old Bernard, because I advocated for him, I guess, pretty hard in this time around, and there's definitely some self-critique that I have to do with how I totally misunderstood the situation. But I guess what I will say that is clarifying and in some ways gratifying is that it is clear to me that the only reason Bernie ever came correct on any of this stuff in the first place was because there was a movement basically forcing him to do it. And, the phenomenon that Bernie Sanders was a pure product of the movement, because it certainly wasn't from him, the man. So if you think about that, and if you think about how, we basically turned him into something and, got that close through pure people power, considering, I guess, what we had to work with,
right,
that you can feel a little bit better about it. But also, fuck off, dude. Your time's done. So, nobody gives a shit anymore.
This was in an interview he did with the New Yorker that came out recently, and so I'll just read the question he was asked, and then Sanders' answer. So, in that letter to Schumer, so there's a letter that Sanders wrote that argued for, quote, ensuring that the resources are available to pay wages that will attract the top tier officers, unquote. So he sent this letter to Schumer. So the question,
cops already make six figures.
Yeah. So the question is, you got some pushback from some of your supporters for a proposal to give better resources to police departments. The criticism was that a lot of people in the progressive movement now are calling for defunding or abolishing the police. Do you? And then this is Sanders' answer. Do I think we should not have police departments in America? No, I don't. There's no city in the world that does not have police departments. What we need I didn't call for more money for police departments. I didn't call for more. He's sort of waffling. I called for police departments to have well-educated, well-trained, well-paid professionals. And too often around this country right now, you have police officers who take the job at very low payment, don't have much education, don't have much training, and I want to change that. I also called for the transformation of police departments into understanding that many police departments and cops deal every day with issues of mental illness, deal with issues of addiction, and all kinds of issues which should be dealt with by mental health professionals or others, and not just by police officers. I think we want to redefine what police departments do, give them the support they need to make their jobs better defined. So I do believe that we need well-trained, well-educated, and well-paid professionals in police departments. Anyone who thinks that we should abolish all the police departments in America, I don't agree. Well, you know who disagrees with Sanders? The Minnesota City Council, which voted to disband their entire police department. And the reason they gave was that the Minnesota Police Department was so corrupt that it was beyond reform. So they had to disband it. Now, I do want to say, I think Camden, New Jersey also...
I was going to bring up Camden. Because Camden is kind of notorious as, one of those places that... It's like Gary. It's like the Gary of the East Coast. Where it's just deindustrialization hit that hard and just did not quit.
Yeah.
And as a bit of a reputation, but... Yeah, they basically wiped the whole slate clean, and then made every cop reapply for their job.
Yeah,
and,
That's what happened. Yeah, that's what happened. They basically got rid of the entire police department, but within like a year or so, they just rehired the old cops. So that's something to be on guard about when it comes to Minnesota disbanding their police department. But the reasoning they gave was, I think, very noteworthy, because they said it was just beyond reform, which this I think that talking point's important, especially when it comes to these calls to either defund or abolish the police, because it's coming from an understanding that these deaths of unarmed black people, like, it's not just a few bad apples. It's a system of policing that is fundamentally rotten, and no matter how much you reform it, it won't change. So the next alternative is to just abolish the police and replace it with something new, and that something new is open to a lot of ideas. Some people,
well, I don't even know if we mean like replace the police, because whatever you replace them with are still going to be cop-like.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing, and, whatever, fucking Vermont, cheese-brained idiot over there doesn't get is that it doesn't matter how many fucking degrees a cop has, because it's not about what their training is. It's about what their material function is.
Exactly.
They have to enforce, so it doesn't matter what you teach them, because, like, what they have to go out and do is enforce capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
And that, there's only one way to do that, and that's violently. Mm-hmm. And so, there's no amount of trainings or checklists or procedures you can do that make, like, the cops that will make them anything other than what they are, which is the enforcement mechanism of capital. Now, certainly there's an argument to be made whether they've metastasized to the point that even, like, the Chamber of Commerce can't rein them in, but they enforce the system of capitalism. So, defunding at the very least is like it is kind of like Medicare for all. It's like, look, let's do a little social democracy. Let's just like maybe have a more functioning welfare state. Literally just get the boots off people's necks.
Yeah.
A little bit, because we're fucking tired. We're fucking tired of, the cops are somehow out now more. Like I see them now in the grocery store parking lot where I never used to see them. They're like, people, I'm tired of looking at those fucking things. All right. I'm just tired of looking at them. I don't want to see them anymore, and
they also, and they also exist in addition to protecting capitalism. They protect white people's fears of black people. Like, hence that whole Amy Cooper video. So it's like,
they need that fear so that suburbia can exist.
Exactly.
So, suburbanites who are like, well, if we got, rid of the police, what would happen to my precious little suburb? And like, I might get fucked up because, lots of people's lives were destroyed so you could have your stupid little suburbs. So get the fuck over it. You know? We're not fucking around anymore. So, like, when I say, like, defunding the police is the half measure, and, like, cities really should take it. Because, like, it's just like the most obvious thing to do. Every single fucking mayor ever, every Democratic mayor ever is like, we need to invest more in social services and not as much in the police. And they never do. And every year they give them more money. And just for once in their life, actually live up to one of their promises that they break every single day. Okay? Like, what's good, the other good thing about defunding the police is that, it channels the city council rage,
Mm-hmm.
Every God bless all the people, those are the good boomers. The good boomers are the ones that go to the city council meeting every month and, wait their turn to speak. And now we've got them to have something incredibly righteous to speak about. This is
another thing to be on guard about, because, so again, when it comes to abolishing the police, like, there's going to be a vacuum. Like, so one way that vacuum gets filled is through privatization. So there's an article in Reason magazine obviously Reason's a libertarian publication.
Of course.
So they say the headline is, "Professionalizing police hasn't worked. Try privatizing instead." And it also says, no amount of protesting is likely to reduce police brutality in the absence of structural reforms that increase accountability, competition, choice, and incentives. So this is another thing to be on guard about, that like especially for people on the left who have a critique of police that leads to basically supporting abolition. You have to think about what the alternative can be, and you don't want like the alternative to be private mercenaries.
Well, you can't. I mean, they already exist. Like, they were brought in for Standing Rock. And stuff,
exactly.
But
so it's like you don't want them to expand.
You really can't have a state and not have like, you know, some sort of official security force that is above all other private security forces. Like a state or a city where there's like, you know, literally competing bands of violent enforcers is like literally like fucking a war zone reason, you fucking idiots. Jesus Christ. No, we need to open up the market, like to the market of law enforcement.
Yeah.
I mean, there already is like second and third, or I mean, there is like a whole industry around the cops. There's all, you know, so much. I think we talked about that last time. Mm-hmm. But it deserves to be repeated that, yeah, there's, you know, from gear salesmen to, you know, trade mags to conventions to all this shit. And a lot of that stuff, because there isn't necessarily anything specifically in the police department itself that makes cops, you know, that encourages that mentality entirely. But, you know, all the second order stuff is one of the things that really encourages the thin blue line shit. And on a cultural front, that is something that we really need to push back against. And you know, this is a workplace issue too. You know, if your workplace like gives discounts to cops or has contracts with the police, you know, push them to get rid of that. You know, because at the very least, let's not, like, can we just, like, remove our, you know, nose from, like, 6 inches all the way up their ass? Can we just, like, can we just detach that for a second? Like, Jesus Christ, guys.
Yeah, and another thing about, like, abolition, I think, I keep forgetting the person. I think it was Ruth Gilmore. I gotta double check on that. But basically, like, abolition can go in two ways. You can either abolish and get rid of the physical structures of prisons and police, or you can abolish the conditions that make police and prisons necessary in the first place. And so I think that's really important, because I think sometimes when people approach like abolishing police, they think, oh, just get rid of police departments. As we saw in Camden, New Jersey, they got rid of their police department, but they just got replaced with like another form of policing that's softer. Whereas I think people who are more, like, I guess, towards our end are basically like, we need to get rid of the conditions that make police a necessity, which means tackling capitalism and settler colonialism, and also giving oppressed and colonized communities counterpower to fight against that. So I think I want to make that distinction. And I think it's a distinction I'll make, like, again, as this idea of abolition becomes more discussed, that, you know, you could abolish, you know, the physical structure of prisons and the police departments, but as long as the material conditions that give rise to the need for police, it'll be filled in by another form of policing. So that's why I brought up the Reason article, which is that if you just abolish police departments, then, well, capitalists are going to be like, okay, well, let's just have like expanded mercenaries and private security, and that's something that, like, you can look at our overseas wars, because we're not using conventional forces as much as we used to, but we are using more, in addition to special ops, we're using more private military contractors, the original PMC or mercenaries. Mm-hmm. So that's something to think about. Is that, like, even if you weaken the state's ability to do violence, it could be replaced by, you know, private capital violence, like feudalism, basically. Feudalism.
Yeah, And don't for a sec, and it's not like those people would be any less racist.
Right. It would just, yeah.
I mean, come on, guys.
I mean, because especially with
reason's stupid.
Because with private security, like there's not a lot of laws to really regulate them. So it would be even worse if you just, let's say, like theoretically, abolish all police departments but give more power to private security. So again, that's something to think about. Is that, like, when talking about abolition, to think about getting rid of the conditions that give rise for the need for policing in the first place.
Well, just to round out the whole thing, because, you know, funniest thing about libertarians is they don't even understand the system they love so much. What is the state? It's the monopoly on violence. What happens under capitalism? Capitalism naturally creates monopolies. So even if you introduce competition, the wonders of the free market to law enforcement, like, what will eventually happen is that, like, one group will crowd all the others out, and they'll be the cops again. So, like, fuck out of here, this dumb bullshit. Why, you know, everyone, this is the thing where it's like, that this should have been, like, the Clarion's call for everyone to be like, oh shit, this is happening. But Americans are we're so caught up in just all the petty, stupid shit that we spend our lives, you know, arguing about, obsessing over, that we really just can't see things for what they are right now. And so, yeah, it's like, of course, reason's gonna come up with, like, yeah, no, let's do mercenaries. That's I mean, that's what they want, really. Because they think they're going to be running them.
There's a really good article in Black Agenda Report called Community Control versus Defunding the Police, a Critical Analysis. So they're not opposing defunding the police, but they say defunding the police today would not lead to the abolition of police tomorrow, which is what a lot of people are saying. Like, if you defund the police, it will lead to abolishing the police sometime in the future. And I think that's I think it's an important sort of thing to think about, because, again, as long as the sort of material conditions exist that give rise for the need for police, even if you defund or get rid of the police, they'll just replace with, like, another form of police. Because before police, there were slave catchers. The slave catchers became police. So if you get rid of police, they could become, like, I don't know, like some sort of cyberpunk, dark, private security force or something like that. Like, that could be, I'm just sort of making it up, but the point is to have a critical understanding of the conditions that give rise for police in the first place. So what this is, I'll put this article in the show notes, but I do want to mention this idea of community control over police, and basically giving the working class and oppressed communities power. I just want to read. I want to just pull up a few quotes just to sort of explain what I'm referring to. This is from the Pan-African Community Action. They were founded in 2015, and they say the core issue is power, not racism. We cannot change. Yes. Yeah, we cannot change our reality by ending racism or the attitudes and opinions of others. Or the attitudes and opinions others hold of us. Our conditions will only change when we shift power into our own hands and exercise self-determination, thereby rendering the opinions of racists irrelevant. And I think that's something to think about, especially because that was something that the Black Panthers, when they were talking about community control over police, it's not like the community policing shit that's different. Like, community policing is a scam. That's not community control. It's people have to be really pay attention to the wording. Community policing is a scam that
it is. It's basically like the entire. It's like pure embeddedness. Mm-hmm. It's the idea that, like, everyone in the neighborhood snitches.
Yeah,
you know, there are no that nobody holds out. It's everyone trusts the cops. Everyone loves the cops, and everyone cooperates with them fully because they believe that the cops defend them or whatever. Community control is like, no, we have the oversight. We can determine how much money you get. We can hire and fire people. Yeah. We get to look at everything you do. Anytime you have to use force, the public gets to actually read that report. And, if you have, like, actually engaged civilians, of that neighborhood overseeing this stuff, then it is like, the question then becomes, wait, why do we need you at all?
Right.
Right? Why don't we just give the money to social workers? Because the whole thing is that, like, actually, look, social workers, don't get paid at the level cops do at all. And, don't have, 60 hours of overtime every month or whatever. At least I don't think, and you could get a lot more, and you could get a lot more done, and you could get, like,
so
you could, you could solve the problems that people think police are there to solve better with social workers.
Yeah. And so there's this really good Medium post called Confessions of a Former Bastard Cop, and he basically explains, like, how institutionally and systemically police are beyond reform. And he goes through very common proposals that people are coming up with, but he's basically saying that these don't work. So increased bias training, he says, a quarterly or even monthly training session is not capable of covering over years of trauma-based camaraderie in police forces. I can tell you from experience, we don't take it seriously. The proctors let us cheat on whatever tests there are, and we all made fun of it later over coffee. He says, tougher laws. I hope you understand by now, cops do not follow the law and will not hold each other accountable to the law. Tougher laws are all the more reason to circle our wagons and protect your brothers and sisters. Now, this is community policing. He said, yes, there is a marginal effect when a few cops get to know members of the community, but look at the protests of 2020. Many of the cops pepper spraying journalists were probably the nice cop a month ago. And so this something he says here that I think is really important that ties into what we're saying. He says, police officers do not protect and serve people. They protect and serve the status quo, polite society, and private property. Using the incremental mechanisms of the status quo will never reform the police because the status quo relies on police violence to exist. Again, that's important because if you don't understand there's a systemic material reality that gives rise for policing to exist in the first place. And he says, capitalism requires a permanent underclass to exploit for cheap labor, and it requires the cops to bring that underclass to heel. That, like, is very important. And
damn, wow, that's a lot from a former cop. I will say.
He said, so his solutions, he says, and basically end qualified immunity, end civil asset forfeiture, break the power of police unions, require malpractice insurance, defund, demilitarize, and disarm cops. And he said one final idea: consider abolishing the police. So this is like a step-by-step thing. You have to do like some, because there are real reforms that actually do make sense. Like ending qualified immunity, that's like common sense. Like that should be like just bullet point one. Then go on to like, defund the police. But I think like it's important to go beyond defunding the police and also like abolish the police and restructure the society so police and prisons aren't necessary in the first place. So that even when you abolish police, they don't get filled in by another sort of quasi-policing force to basically bring the underclass and bring the colonized people to heel. Which I think that's like when we're talking about police abolition, I think people really, really need to understand that. Like why police and prisons exist in the first place. They exist because of a very, very brutal class and racial hierarchy that gets reinforced through police violence.
Yes, very specifically, the way capitalism functions is that you need an oversupply of labor. So, in order to be able to drive wages down and to get labor at the cheapest amount, you need more laborers than you have actual jobs. That's what unemployment is, of course. But you also need those other people to be kept in line and to not ever feel like they can like get by without a job. So they have to be constantly criminalized. That's what the police are for. In the northern states when police weren't slave patrol, it basically existed to beat up the working class and make sure they went to their jobs. that like, yes, the whole system of capitalism, requires a police force or colonialism.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
And also what's considered to be criminal is determined by race and class. They're like, because crimes of the elite never get policed. Like the very rich corporate America, they can literally rob the country blind and they would not get shot by the police. Yeah. And that's not accidental because the police exist to beat up the lower classes and to beat up the colonized classes.
Like literally, and this was actually a pretty profound radicalizing moment. Was watching one of the Frontline documentaries about the financial crisis, and they literally just had these DOJ people say like, we know what crimes these CEOs did, but it would be too detrimental to the economy to arrest
exactly
them. So I mean, he literally just admitted they were above the law.
Exactly.
I always like to imagine like a like one of the hot zone maps, but for white collar crime. Mm-hmm. And so it's all the like financial districts. And, if you had like Wall Street motherfuckers being harassed by like the financial crime police at the same way.
And also
like they bust into a copy room or something.
And also, like, look at war criminals like the Bush administration and Cheney and I mean, fucking Kissinger, right? Like, all the people who are responsible for war crimes overseas, there's no...
ICC, racist as fuck.
Yeah, like, there's no accountability for those people, And that, again, that's not accidental. Like, the system of policing and so-called criminal justice, they're meant to reinforce pre-existing hierarchies. So, if those hierarchies remain and you abolish police, then you're just going to get another form of sort of quasi-police to reinforce the hierarchy. So when it comes to abolition, you have to get rid of the reason why that kind of like why policing and prisons exist in the first place. But again, it's like, I wanted to mention that because I just think there's a lot of confusion about what this idea of abolition means and how to explain it, and I think there's a lot of great resources. You don't have to just rely on us. There's plenty of good stuff to look up. Miriam Kaba in Chicago, she's really good.
She's been doing this work for decades.
So she's an OG. Like, she's definitely an OG. I'd recommend. Well, her Twitter is kind of private, so I don't think she really likes having too many people follow her Twitter. But Miriam Kaba, like she's really good when it comes to this stuff.
Project Nia, is the organization.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There's a lot of really good resources and people to talk to. We're just kind of giving our take on it.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Well, yeah, I think we're gonna. I want to like sort of compile a database of like the real organizations you should support materially, because there's just like so many people are making money off this that should not be, and the people that deserve the resources, we should do whatever we can to make sure that they get them. I do want to bring up, since he mentioned it in his article, is the question of police unions, because people in the AFL-CIO have been petitioning now to get the IUPA, which is the police union in the AFL-CIO, out, because like cops don't have any. Cops beat up the working class; they're not part of it, right? But Richard Trumpka, head of the AFL-CIO, of course, we knew that he wasn't going to move, because the AFL-CIO is just like a horrendously conservative, business-friendly union, and that's why it's allowed to exist as at the level that it is. But, he said that basically, we've heard it, but we believe that the police have the right to organize and collectively bargain. And this is something that we need to be really clear about, because the right has already picked up on this, and they, are absolutely going to try and do bills that will, claim to like go after police unions, but it'll be like police unions and every other public sector union, like they tried the last time, in Wisconsin and Ohio, and probably even whatever it is they do to police unions will get gutted soon after. So we should not like look for like legislative action to break up police unions, but what absolutely does need to happen is that everyone who's in a union, that has cops in it, needs to, start pushing their union to get them out, because they should have no quarter in the labor movement at all. And, a lot of people understand this, but part of the problem is because unions have been, just so relentlessly assaulted by capital for the past 40 years. Like, police are one of the places where they can like get dues, and it's pretty easy to get people to sign up for it. But really, like, cops don't even, because they're not even like working class at this point, they are basically petty bourgeois. That like, it's like they don't really need unions. I mean, they're like unions for the supervisors too. So union, I don't even know if you can call them unions really. They're just like associations. Like the FOP isn't really like a union. Yeah. So
I just, sorry, I just want to make sure, like, because I had forgot the name. So Ruth Wilson Gilmore, she's an abolitionist, and her quote, she says, "We aim to abolish the conditions under which the prison came to be the solution to problems, rather than the buildings which we came to call prisons." So it's not enough just to abolish the physical structure.
I mean, we can tear down the prison itself too. There's not a whole lot you can do with these buildings.
Yeah. I mean, it's just
they're pretty ugly buildings.
It's just get rid of the physical building, but like also the conditions that make their existence necessary in the first place, or make them seem like that they're a solution to the problem. So I wanted to mention that quote, because I think that's a really good quote to think about abolition, which is, again, we aim to abolish the conditions under which the prison came to be the solution to problems, rather than the buildings which we came to call prisons. So
but just to round out what I was saying about police unions is that, whatever, if cops want to get together and organize whatever, I don't give a shit, but that has nothing to do with anyone in the labor movement. That has nothing to do with anyone in the working class. Like they need to be fully and completely out, and no solidarity, absolutely nothing. Just like they are completely out. Fuck those guys. I mean, everyone knows this, but union bureaucracies and stuff that have allowed them to kind of worm their way in when they really shouldn't be there. So I just wanted to clear the air on that. One of the other, fascinating little developments, because I think this, what we're trying to communicate, what I'm trying to communicate is that this movement for a world without cops, which of course is the most beautiful thing you can ever imagine. I literally can't imagine anything better to devote your life to than trying to have a world without cops. They're really, they are the worst people in the entire world, but some of that does come, there is a community aspect to it. There's a workplace organizing aspect to it, but there's also a militant aspect to it. So I don't know if you guys have been following Seattle, but since the protests started, people have been taking specifically to the main park in Capitol Hill, which is the sort of it was initially the gayborhood of Seattle, and then it kind of got gentrified. And it was pretty gentrified when I lived there. But there's like a giant park in the middle of it, and they had been going there every night since the protests began, for, to hold the square kind of Tahrir Square style, Arab Spring style. And they were getting tear gassed. They were getting shot with all sorts of weird shit. I've been talking to people who were there, and getting report backs. But finally, eventually, the police basically ran out of tear gas, and then they just left. They left the police station in Capitol Hill, and they just quit. And so now Capitol Hill, your average gentrified little arts district in a mid to large size city, is an autonomous zone.
Nice.
It is like quite literally an autonomous zone. It's like the Paris Commune. They have like armed guards, but they're patrolling it, but they also like are doing garbage collection, doing meals and all sorts of stuff. And I'm gonna try and cover this more in depth later on, but it is, it's a beautiful thing to see. And I'm not sure what's gonna happen. Certainly that's not the kind of thing the police are just willing to accept, but it's it's an indication of, one, just how cowardly the police are and how they aren't actually willing to fight for anything. All they just want to beat people up, but they're not willing to risk anything. So that's something to remember, is that like they're all punks, they're all cowards, and they'll just run if you stand up to them, for long enough.
Yeah.
But also that it is like exactly what we're talking about, where we are, they have the chance to reorganize society in a way that doesn't need cops. And, certainly, I remember the days of Occupy Wall Street, and I, spent some time at some of that encampments. And, for all the idealism, I mean, I will say that the execution was not quite, it left a lot to be desired. I'll say that. But part of the whole thing is that people learn from these lessons. They learn from the 99 WTO protests, which basically did shut down the city. And, if anyone can do it, the Seattle anarchists, probably could. So, my full support, and, whatever my philosophical disagreements with the anarchists are, like, this is not at all the time for that kind of shit. Absolutely, no sectarianism allowed in this movement. We, at some point, people have to become organized and disciplined enough that it is basically, kind of a state-like or party-like function. But, we'll see, because the Paris Commune did fall apart to internal squabbling. So hopefully, my, heart goes out to those guys, and that's the kind of stuff, because they're expecting it to fall apart. But what if it doesn't? What if it's great? Then that's the real problem they have on their hands. What if it's great, and what if it's the most beautiful part of the entire city, right? Then what? So, and also, double blow against the police and gentrification, because, what's the real estate market in an autonomous zone? So, that's another thing. World without cops is fighting gentrification. I mean, it all links up. Anti-police is just, the tip of the spear. It's the spearhead through which every other movement, attaches itself and follows the direction. And that's the thing that, if there's something to be understood coming out of this, it is, this is my personal opinion, but I think that that's exactly it, is that, we just have to have just a widespread anti-police movement in this country. And, it will take many forms, and it will, require many partners and lots of that. But it is just, we have to get rid of these fucking cops, dude. We just have to. There's no way around it. We're not stopping, and we're not going to give up.
Yeah. Yeah, because also, like, even, that's why I brought up the Confessions of a Former Bastard Cop, that even the reforms that are being proposed now, like, they're not going to work, right? And that's why I brought up the quote from what the Minneapolis City Council's reasoning for disbanding the police, which is, it's beyond reform. Like, there's a fundamental rot in American policing that's beyond reform. So you have to just basically just overturn the whole system. That's the alternative. That's the only thing that's left. Is like, we've tried like, hugging cops and doing racial bias training and all this other stuff and body cameras, and that has not worked. And giving them more, like, it does money. Not work. There's a fundamental rot within American policing that's tied to the fundamental rot that exists in this country, and you have to just flip the whole thing over, press the reset button, and
you need a social revolution along with the political.
What's weird is that, like, America. I mean, I don't get all giddy about like American jingoism, but I mean, this country was founded on a revolution, right? It's part like that's it. Like, revolution is part of American history, and we look at other countries when they revolt against oppression as like, oh, they're brave freedom fighters. So this is our chance at that moment. This is our moment
yeah. I mean, if you consider yourself a patriot, you have to be fighting the police. Yeah. It's not even a question now. If you like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it at all. If you consider yourself someone who believes in freedom or democracy or any of that bullshit, I mean, it's bullshit the way they talk about it. They are real concepts, but it's like, if you believe any of that stuff, if you claim, or if you think that those are your principles and that's what you fight for, you have to be anti-police. It's just, there's not even a question. People, I guess a lot of, lily-livered libs, hate, like, why do we have to take sides? Because that's how conflict is, and this is class conflict, and it has been for centuries. And conflict is, there's one side and then there's another, and which side are you on? I'm sorry that, like, you don't, that's hard for you, but it's like, you gotta pick a side, and it's like, no, you can't be pro cop in any way, shape, or form at this point anymore. There's no qualified statement. It's not like, oh, well, we need to think about, look, do you think that in Algeria they were like, oh, well, some of the French cops are good, like, it's just a few bad apples, maybe we can reform the French occupation? Like, do you think they were I mean, maybe there were a couple of people who had been bought off who said some dumb shit like that, but that's not what the people wanted. They wanted them out, and that's what we want. We want them out. We want all cops gone. All cops gone. No cops. It's, just say it a bunch of times. Like, the last protest I went to, which really wasn't a protest, they said Black Lives Matter over and over again as some sort of magical incantation.
One of those.
Which, as if you can, like, bring it into being or something by saying it enough. If you're gonna do that, do it with, like, no more police. Say that over and over again, and let it, work its way into your soul and feel it, because this is, honestly, like, the left, let's call it, or Americans, or the American people, have shown actually a surprising amount of bravery and courage and resilience in all of this in a way that I honestly had not seen. And, it's inspired me to, really get my ass going and, make this podcast, the best and direct service to the movement in a way that, like, we can, amplify it and keep it going and, make it in its fullest and most powerful form. And that's, what we're going to be doing with it. And that's what everyone needs to, they can't let that feeling, that initial burst, they can't let it go away. Because here's what I'll say from, my occupied days, or even some of the BLM stuff, is like, you don't know when you're going to get that glimpse again, that burst. You may not get it for 5-10 years. You may never get it again for the rest of your life. This is really long and hard work, but it is, hard work in service of the most, noble and beautiful goal you could ever ask for. So please stay in it. Read up. And also, like, this is the way you talk to your neighbors. This is the way you build community. That's one of the things that's so important that I think everyone needs to understand is the way we fight the police is through community. Yes. It's through trust. It's through rebuilding those bonds of social trust that, neoliberal capitalism has worked so hard to alienate that, we find ourselves atomized and we don't know anyone. And it's like, this is it. And I feel like there is, a little bit difference in the air right now where people are a little more trusting of each other. I don't know. Maybe not. But that's such an important thing, But also get in shape, become stronger, literally, learn how to fight. I mean, all this stuff. It's about what, one thing that I've discovered, I guess, in my life is that, especially with political stuff, is that when I act, not that I have any sort of extreme power or anything like that, but when I act in my fullest and when I, to the fullest of my convictions, and I put myself out there in a way that, constitutes some actual risk, I do see, there some sort of effect where it's like, you discover that you're not the only one who's doing that. But if you're not doing it because you're waiting for someone else to do it, those other people are waiting for you to do it. So you have to be doing it.
Yeah. And actually, that what you're saying reminds me of all this sort of talk about allies, right? And white allies and all this stuff. And it's like, I was talking to a friend of mine about this, like, about being an ally and a friend. It's like you have to boil down like what those terms mean. Like, allies is usually an alliance is usually between two equal forces for trying to achieve a common purpose. It's so when you're talking about like let's say like, okay, it's like, there could be like a natural alliance between black people and Native Americans against white supremacy. Like, we're coming from different communities, but there's a shared grievance and a shared goal, which is to get rid of settler colonialism and capitalism because we both have been screwed by it. Like, that's an alliance, right? And alliance, like allies, like they don't take over each other's armies. We let each other fight on our own fronts, but we can come together to fight for a common cause and fight in parallel and support each other. Like, one side supports the other side and back and forth. And also, like, with allies and particularly friends, like a friend is there for you through the thick and thin. Like, a friend is going to be there for you, like a really good friend that you can trust. They're going to be there for you during your rough times, right? Like, a friend is not going to let you down during the rough times. And so I want to say that because, especially when it comes to allies to the black community, because especially in light of Black Lives Matter, like I think those have to be drilled in people's heads that if you want to be an ally to black people and Black Lives Matter, you have to fight with us as equals toward a common goal, which in this case is like just hatred of police in a world without policing, in a world where policing is not necessary, in a world in which like racial and class and gender hierarchies don't exist. And with white people have a different position in this because, at least in American society, white people and black people are not situated equally in terms of politics, social status, economics. Like black people, white people, we can eat at the same lunch counter, but like we're coming from very, very different social, economic, and political positions. So in order for white people to be effective, and this is just what I've been thinking about, is that like white people have to give themselves up totally. Like, because white people, because the thing about like whiteness is like, and Peter, you and I have been talking about this, like, outside, like with whiteness, like everything is about you. It's like, because with white allies are like, oh my God, like how can I do this? And it's always like white people make allyship about themselves when it's like, no, it's not about you. Like, you have to get rid of you. You have to get rid of the self. You have to give up the self and throw yourself 100% in the struggle through thick and thin. Like, once you're in the struggle, you're here 100%. There's no turning back. You have to throw your entire fucking body and your goddamn soul into this shit. There's no turning back. So if you go to a protest, okay, you better be going to the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and calling out, like, you know, your white friends when they say racist shit, or encouraging your white friends to come to a protest. Like, I'm sure there are plenty, like, you know, white ladies who are, like, reading Ibram Kendi. Look, all your other, like, nonprofit liberal white lady friends, go to a protest together. Who cares if they don't share the same politics? Go to the same fucking protest and make it a consistent thing, because that's the thing about struggle and purpose. Like, this is a time, I think, especially for white people, to find purpose. Like, you can, like, because the thing is, like, black people, we've been doing this because of survival. Like, we have to do it to survive. If white people want to be allies, and I'm not trying to do this like to be like an anti-racism expert or whatever, but I do think that, you know, when it comes to political coalitions and partnerships, I do think that, like, there is such a thing as effective allyship. And I think, like, you know, especially with a lot of white people who are becoming new to this stuff, like Black Lives Matter, police abolition, anti-racism, all this stuff, like, it's definitely going to sound new. But, like, if this is your first time, you got to throw yourself in it. You're going to have to give up a lot of comforts of white American society. You have to give that up and fight for a better future, even if you may not see it in your lifetime, maybe hopefully in your kid's lifetime or your grandkid's lifetime. But you have to be the one who's willing to plant the seed so that it can grow into something beautiful, and be willing to risk and give yourself up. And that's something that American society does not teach people. And that's a skill that people have to relearn, how to socialize, build connections with people, throw yourself into the struggle, build community. Like that's what the fuck we need right now. Anyway.
Yeah, well, yes, all of that. Because America teaches us individualism, and individualism is about basically there's nothing greater than me. And it's like anything else that is happening in society, how does that affect me? And what can I do to make the most effect in society, you know, just through me or whatever. And really, I mean, individualism is just bourgeois thinking, because, like, it's not even on offer for most of the working class. But it is also just like, yeah, I mean, you really do have to get to a point where it is like you cannot live normally. You cannot be well adjusted in this society. And because you know what? None of us are. Like, we can't like live in this society and have everything be okay and not think about it or whatever. We don't have that luxury. So you have to get to that level, you know. And look, don't burn yourself out, of course, and, you know, don't be, you know, be strategic about things, but you know, find comrades and be accountable. But I mean, also just say that, like, yeah, white people, the white left, I spent like 8 months taking cues from you going along with your plan to get Bernie Sanders to be president. And in 2 weeks, under black leadership, this country has accomplished exponentially greater amounts of things than the 8 months of that bullshit. Like, I'm sorry, but I am actually pretty upset that, like, that I was able to get fooled by this, because I wasn't even that fooled in 2016, but it was like, yeah, no, it's like you guys just kind of don't know what you're doing. I mean, I'm sorry, but, you know, that's what happened in the 60s too, is that it was watching the civil rights movement, watching black people risk their lives, you know, for their freedom. And that made white people think, like, there's a lot of other stuff we could be doing.
And also, like, a lot of those, particularly, like, white Zoomer kids, I do think that, like, again, I'm saying this because I want effective allyship and not, like, the bullshit performative stuff. And I do think there is such a thing as white people and non-black folks being effective, not even allies, comrades, friends. Yeah. Like, comrades and friends to black people on a true level of what it means to be a friend. I think that is possible, I just think the society we live in makes it very, very difficult for people to do that effectively.
Well, yes, and also this is because there's all these received narratives about what a multiracial friendship looks like, through like Green Book type movies and shit, where it's like an excuse to be racist to each other, and that's the opposite. And it's like white people want black friends so they can use the word, honestly, and stuff like that. And it's like we're sort of an accoutrement that, just makes them seem more whole, but it doesn't. There's no risk on their part. We just help them grow. And it's like, no, you have to risk. You have to sacrifice. You have to be willing to give up whatever, bourgeois future you possibly could have held. Because honestly, not that I ever really had one. I mean, if I'm going to be honest with myself. But, I mean, both of us, we went to Stanford or whatever. If we wanted to have joined the system, we could have, certainly I'm capable enough, considering the kind of idiots that run this shit. But, we made, I at least made the mistake of believing there was something greater to devote myself to. And, it has not been easy, reckoning with the direction my life has taken because I prioritize the struggle over other things. But, it's got me to this point where it is like now I feel and I know that I'm stronger because of it. And, where I'm able to do greater things and, be bolder and take bolder action. And that is something that it takes a while for it to really manifest. This is just the first step for a lot of people. And, that you get the burst, you get the rush, you get the sense of being in a historical moment, and it's an incredibly powerful feeling. And it's better than any drug you can ever take. I haven't taken heroin.
Neither have I.
I would assume, that those feelings are so powerful that you like have a duty to live up to them. But it's also incredibly disorienting because of the way American society is structured, where you're trying, if it would be one thing to just go to the mountains and, hold up for months. That certainly would be not easy, but at least there's a sense of like, this is what you do. We don't have that kind of a, direct program, but, we have to figure that out. And the only way we figure it out is through struggle, is through doing stuff. The movement is at the place it is now because of the lessons of Ferguson. And that's the thing that people need to understand, is that all this stuff builds on each other.
Yeah, and also I think this is a unique time. I will say this, I think, for white people to be effective allies, I think it's just having a sense of purpose and identity that does not rely on succumbing to and perpetuating a system that relies on other people's suffering. And I think what's interesting about this moment is because on top of there being these protests, like, we're in essentially a depression. So in terms of like the promise that was made to millennials and zoomers that like, okay, you can graduate from college and like have like this white picket fence, like that's all gone. It's always been like shit for black people, but like we're at a point where like that future is gone for a lot of white people. So at some point, you have to realize like, wait a minute, hold on, like our struggles, like our fates are linked in some way, right? And like we have to sort of find a way to build a better world that we can all survive in and live in, like dignity, self-determination, respect, in real humanity. And that's going to entail unlearning a lot of shit we were fed, but also being willing to take that leap and be like, you know what, I'm going to fight for something a lot better, a fight for a better future, not just for myself, but for people I care about and for people who are, going to come after me. At least hoping that the human species survives whatever climate shit we face in the next 50 or 100 years.
And it's also just about yelling fuck 12, because fuck them. I mean, fuck them. I think about, every single time, like as a child, it's like police are just these terrorizing figures, and just like every single cop movie that I watched as a kid, and just being like, it's if I think about all the things that gave me anxieties, all the reasons for why I felt a particular way and felt like, I was too weak or too small or unworthy for life in this world. So much of it comes from the police. And, one thing that I've realized is that, like, a lot of those feelings are, something a lot of black kids have gone through. It's just like feeling, just this intense scariness of the world, where it is just like, it's made out to be so much more horrible and so much more violent and, just completely devoid of humanity and trust. And the reason that they make it out that way is to justify the existence of the police. And so they have to terrorize you because, like, they're terrorists. I mean, it's, so much of it. I mean, and that's not just the police. That's the systems on top of it. That's the Democrats who tell you that you're wrong for wanting to push anything further than what their latest poll says. I mean, it's all of it. And, overcoming the fear is the most important part about all of this, I think, is getting rid of that fear. And once you get rid of that fear, you will feel and you will be free. And that is what it is.
And I'll just say this note. Like I've been playing West African drumming the past couple of years, and there's this this term by the Akan people of Ghana called Sankofa, which means to go back and fetch. Like, so go back and fetch the traditions of your ancestors and apply them for the present, so you can go further in the future. And so, like, by me playing a djembe drum, which is, I would consider a part of Black history that predates slavery, I see it as a way to continue Black culture forward into the future. And I say that because, when I think of Black Lives Matter, and this is something I'm been telling people in my musician circles, because a lot of musicians have been talking about Black Lives Matter and what to do and whatnot. And for me, like, the point I've been trying to say is, when it comes to Black Lives Matter, there is a beautiful Black life and culture that exists despite death. Like, and I think that's something really important, because I think sometimes, like, we get so inundated with images of Black suffering that that's all people think Black people exist to do, which is just to live and just die. But there's so much more. There's a real beauty to Black culture that just growing up, I was taught to be proud of, and I'm very happy that I grew up in a family that really steeped those values in me. And so when it comes to Black Lives Matter, I like to say, like, for any kind of going forward, I think it's important to respect Black life and culture and peoplehood as it exists, so that it can continue beyond death. Like, Black life can't just exist in death. Like, it has to be protected and also, like, protected in a way that, like, so we can be truly free. And I think in order to be truly free, it's important to preserve some of those pre-slavery Black cultures and traditions, but also, just to remind people that, like, there is a Black culture and Black life that exists beyond death. Especially our music, like, I mean, blues, rock, jazz, funk, hip hop, R&B, all that stuff. So I just wanted, I guess, to close this episode out, it's just to basically affirm Black life and celebrate it, and have it carry us forward into the future, into a future that is free and just for everyone, for all of us. So, yeah.
Last thing I'll say is last night I watched Spook Who Sat by the Door, which is it's based off a novel, and it is about a black guy who joins the CIA and it just is perfectly invisible in that token higher way. And then he leaves and he goes and does the revolution, basically. And the CIA was really tried hard to ban this film. And I completely understand why, because the stuff they're just like giving you a manual for guerrilla warfare in many ways. And it was, but beyond that, it really hits everything. You can find it on YouTube, but it talks about colorism, talks about class, it talks about, the main character's childhood friend is a cop, and I mean, there's, there's a riot scene and everything. I highly recommend it. And it's a good reminder. The way you were talking about is that, our struggle has always been a revolutionary one. It has to be, because there's no iteration of the existing order in which we can, survive and thrive in. And so, for us to live, it is to seek revolution. And, what we need is for everyone else to feel and live that way too.
And to quote Adam Clayton Powell Jr., keep the faith.
And to quote YG,
Peace.
stay dangerous. So, yeah.